The wind moved across the open plains like a warning, brushing against the high grass and carrying the scent of dust, pine, and something distant that felt almost like fate. Travelers often said that the old American frontier had its own way of speaking, its own quiet voice hidden in the rustling brush and the low howl across the ridges. On that long stretch of land where towns were few and danger often rode with the setting sun, one story began with a young woman running for her life and a powerful Apache warrior who stepped between her and the ruin, chasing her. It was the kind of meeting people whispered about for years, the kind that felt shaped by the land itself. She had been known in her small settlement as a quiet but determined soul, someone who worked harder than most and carried more weight on her shoulders than anyone her age should. Her name was Leora, a name that meant light in a world that had not always shown her kindness. For months, she had tried to survive the bitterness of a family that treated her like a burden, the harsh rules of a homestead that saw her as nothing more than an extra pair of hands. When the trouble started, when the wrong man set his eyes on her and decided she owed him her future, Leora knew the frontier could swallow a woman whole if she didn't fight back. So she ran, clutching only a small cloth bag and a hope that someone out there might hear her silent plea. The trouble was, the frontier had its own shadows. The man chasing her rode with two others, and their horses thundered across the dry ground as they followed her tracks. Leora heard them long before she saw them, their shouts echoing against the canyon walls behind her. She pushed herself harder, her feet raw and blistered, her breath sharp in her throat. She had no weapon, no help, and no safe place to hide. But she had something inside her that refused to give up, something that made her keep moving even when her legs felt like they might collapse. Up ahead, the land dipped into a narrow gorge streaked with rock ledges and tall cottonwoods. Leora slid down the slope, grabbing branches to keep from falling. She could hear the men shouting again, closer now, angry and determined. She pressed her back against a rock wall and forced herself not to cry. This place was supposed to be her chance for a new start, a quiet life far from the cruelty she had known. Instead, she found herself cornered in a canyon, where even the birds had gone silent. But fate has strange timing in the old American world. It often brings the right person forward in the very moment all hope seems lost. A soft crunch of gravel echoed nearby. Leora froze. It wasn't the sound of hooves. It was lighter, slower, steady, in a way that carried strength, but not anger. She turned her head and saw a tall figure step out from behind a cluster of boulders. At first she feared another threat, but the sight in front of her made her heart catch in her chest. The man was an Apache warrior, his presence powerful and calm, his long dark hair tied back with a strip of leather. His body was marked with paint and scars that told stories of battles survived, and his sharp eyes held a depth that made Leora feel as if he saw everything she had been through in a single glance. He carried a bow on his back and a hand-carved staff at his side, but he showed no sign of raising either against her. For a moment the world felt still. Only their breathing filled the space between them. He stepped closer with careful movements, as if approaching a frightened animal that had been mistreated for too long. Leora backed up instinctively, but the rock wall rose behind her, leaving her nowhere to go. "You are hunted," he said, his voice deep and steady. His accent carried the cadence of his people, a rhythm shaped by mountains and open sky. "I heard them before I saw you." Leora tried to speak, but her throat tightened. She forced out a whisper. Please don't let them take me." The warrior looked past her toward the ridge where the shouting climbed louder. His jaw tightened. "They will not touch you." She shook her head, trembling. "You don't understand? They won't stop." He turned fully toward her then, his expression firm but softening around the edges. "My name is Kellen," he said. "You are under my protection now." Something in his tone rooted her feet to the ground. There was authority in it, a promise shaped not by force but by honor. Still, fear tugged at her. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Kellen's eyes held hers without wavering. "Pain recognizes pain. You have carried it for too long. I will not let more be added." Before she could ask more, the riders burst into view on the ridge above. Their eyes widened when they spotted her below. One of them pointed, and the horses began to descend the slope. Kellen placed himself in front of Leora, shielding her from their view. His stance was unshakable, as if the very earth had risen through him. "Stay behind me," he told her. The men shouted threats as they approached, claiming Leora belonged to them. Kellen didn't move. His presence alone made the lead rider pull his horse back a step. Something about the warrior's calm gaze and grounded strength cut through their bravado. "Hand her over," the man snarled. "She's ours." Kellen didn't flinch. "She is not property. She's coming with us," the man yelled. "No," Kellen replied. "She stays under my care." The lead rider scowled, gripping the reins with a shaking hand. "You don't get to decide that." Kellen lowered his voice, but it struck harder than a shout. "I decide what happens here." Leora could barely breathe. She had never seen anyone stand against the men who tormented her. Never seen anyone speak for her, fight for her, or risk anything for her. She felt tears burn her eyes, but not from fear this time. It was something else. Something unfamiliar and overwhelming, the tension built with every passing second. The riders shifted uneasily, their anger battling with the instinctive caution Kellen stirred in them. The horses snorted, restless. Sensing the storm in the air, Kellen leaned slightly toward Leora without taking his eyes off the threat. His voice softened just for her. "Stay by my side every day, and you will never suffer again." The promise wrapped around her like a warm shield, but before she could answer, the lead rider jerked his hand toward his holster. Kellen moved. What happened next shifted the entire path of Leora's life. But the outcome of that clash, and the choice she would have to make in the dust that followed, hung in the balance as the canyon seemed to hold its breath. Kellen's movement was so fast that Leora barely had time to react. 1 second the rider reached for his holster, and the next Kellen stepped forward with a controlled force that made the nearest horse rear back. Dust shot into the air, hooves pounding and echoing against the canyon walls. The rider cursed and fought to steady his mount, but Kellen didn't lift a weapon. He didn't need to. His presence alone warned them that pushing farther would bring consequences they weren't ready to face. The men hesitated, their confidence shaking under the weight of a warrior who didn't fear them or their guns. But they weren't ready to back down either. Their pride was too thick, too bruised by the idea that someone like Kellen would stop them. Leora watched them with wide eyes, every breath trembling inside her chest. She felt both protected and terrified, knowing that one wrong move could turn this moment into something far darker. Kellen took a slow step forward. The canyon light caught the lines of his face, making him look carved out of stone and shadow. "Turn back," he said. "Leave this place." The lead rider narrowed his eyes and spat into the dust. "She belongs to us." Her family agreed. "She has debts." Leora flinched at those words. Debts, that was the excuse they always used. Her life, her body, her hope, all tied up in a lie that had trapped her for years. She clenched her fists as anger mixed with fear in her chest. Kellen didn't look back at her, but his voice sharpened. "You speak of her as if she is a price to be paid. She is not. She made her choice. She does not return with you." One of the riders grinned with bitter arrogance. "And who are you to get between a settlement and its agreements?" Kellen lifted his chin with slow certainty. "I am the one who stands where others should have stood. That is enough." The men exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected someone desperate, someone weak, someone they could push aside like they always did. They had not expected an Apache warrior with a steady gaze and a spine forged by the land. Before they could speak again, Kellen moved slightly, placing his hand behind him in a subtle gesture for Leora to stay still. She felt the rough surface of the rock wall press harder against her back as she watched the tension tighten like a rope about to snap. Then, without warning, a sharp cry sounded in the distance, a hawk circling above the ridge. The riders jerked their heads up, startled, giving Kellen just enough time to shift his stance again. The moment felt suspended, heavy with the possibility of violence or retreat, but before anything else could happen, the riders pulled their horses back several paces. "We'll be back," the lead rider growled. "You can't hide her forever." Kellen didn't answer. He watched them until they finally turned their mounts and galloped away. their threats echoing down the canyon like fading thunder. Only when the last hoofbeat disappeared did he allow his shoulders to loosen. Leora pressed a trembling hand to her chest, her breath coming in shaky waves. She felt both weak and strangely alive, as if she had been pulled from the edge of a cliff without realizing how close she came to falling. Kellen turned toward her slowly. "You are safe for now," he said, "but they will return." She nodded, her throat tightening again. "I know, they always do." He stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "Then you cannot stay here. This canyon will not protect you. You must come with me." Leora hesitated. She had spent so much of her life under someone else's control that trusting a stranger felt dangerous, even if that stranger had just risked himself for her. She met his eyes, searching for anything hidden or threatening. Instead, she found steady strength, quiet pain, and something that felt like truth. "I don't want to cause trouble for you," she whispered. "You are not trouble," Kellen said, his tone steady. "You are someone who deserves freedom. You deserve a life where suffering is no longer a shadow on your back." His words hit deeper than she expected. No one in her life had ever said anything close to that, without waiting for her answer. He turned and began walking toward the open stretch of land beyond the canyon. "Come," he said. "I will take you to my camp. You can rest. We will decide what must happen after." Leora looked back at the path the riders had taken. She knew if she stayed, they would find her. They always did. She swallowed hard, brushed the dust from her skirt, and stepped away from everything she had ever known as she followed Kellen. The land opened into rolling terrain touched by the fading light of afternoon. The long shadows from the mountains stretched across the ground, creating patterns that looked like ancient stories drawn by nature itself. Every step she took felt like she was crossing over into a different world, one shaped by old traditions, quiet strength, and the deep heartbeat of the frontier. Kellen walked with a silent confidence. He didn't ask her questions yet, and he didn't look back to see if she followed. He simply moved forward, trusting she would choose her own steps. Leora appreciated that. For once, no one grabbed her arm or pulled her along. She walked because she wanted to, not because she was forced. When they reached a ridge overlooking a narrow river, Kellen finally paused. "Tell me," he said, keeping his gaze on the flowing water, "why did they chase you?" Leora wrapped her arms around herself. "Because they decided my future for me. Because they think they can own me." "How long has this been happening?" "Years," she whispered. "My family never cared what I wanted. They sent me to work in another home, saying it was for my own good, but it was just another way to control me. When I refused to accept a promise I never made, the men claimed I owed them. I had to serve their demands or pay some debt I never agreed to. I tried to run before. They always found me." Kellen's expression hardened with something fierce and protective. "You have lived in chains made by their greed." "Yes, and I never had anyone on my side. Until now." Breeze carried her words softly, but Kellen heard them with full weight. He nodded slowly, as if absorbing every part of her pain. "There's more to your story," he said. "Something deeper. I can hear it." She hesitated, then lowered her gaze. "I don't know what will happen now. I don't know where I belong." Kellen turned toward her fully, his eyes steady. "You belong where you are, treated with honesty and dignity. That is the only place worth staying." His voice was soft but firm, and something in her chest eased at his words. Yet beneath the comfort, fear still crawled inside her. Those riders would not forget what happened. They would return. And she didn't know if Kellen's protection would be enough when more people got involved. Settlements didn't like when someone escaped their control. They didn't like when someone stronger stepped in. As Kellen led her down toward the river, Leora felt that growing tension, the kind that twists around the future like an unseen storm gathering over the horizon. She could feel that their paths were now tied together. But she didn't know if that tie was safety or danger. Kellen stopped near the water and looked, crossed the landscape, as if reading something only he could interpret. "We have little time," he said. "They will bring others." Leora felt her breath catch again. "Will they really keep coming?" "Yes," Kellen answered. "Men like them do not give up their control easily. The wind brushed against her hair and she hugged herself tighter. What do we do? Kellen didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, his eyes sharp as he scanned the land. We move before nightfall, he finally said. There is a place they cannot reach. But getting there will not be simple. His words sent a shiver through her. Why not? Kellen turned toward her, his expression shadowed by something unspoken. Because the path ahead carries dangers of its own. And they are not the only ones watching us now. The sound of rustling brush behind them made Leora spin around, her heart thudding. Someone or something was approaching. Leora froze where she stood. Her breath caught halfway in her throat as the sound behind them grew clearer. Kellen raised one hand slowly, signaling her not to move. His posture shifted, grounding through the earth, ready to face whatever emerged from the tall brush. The tension wrapped around them so tightly that even the river felt silent. Its soft rush drowned beneath the pounding of her heartbeat. From the shadows stepped a young Apache scout, lean and sharp-eyed, carrying a short spear and moving with quiet grace. He paused when he recognized Kellen, then dipped his head in respect. I searched the ridge, he said. There were 3 riders, but only one returned to town. The other 2 circled the long way south. Kellen's jaw tightened. They're trying to trap our path. Yes, the scout replied. And word is spreading. The settlement leader has called for men to ride at dawn. Leora felt her knees weaken. She knew what that meant. If the settlement decided she was worth the trouble, they would gather more riders, more weapons, and more rage. They would twist the story until Kellen looked like the one who had taken her by force. That was how the frontier worked. People believed whatever version of events made them feel powerful. Kellen turned to her. They will not stop. We must move before they gather strength. A wave of guilt washed over her. This is because of me. I brought danger to you and your people. Kellen shook his head, his voice steady. You brought truth. Danger was already there. You only revealed it? Scout looked between them, curiosity flashing across his face. She is the one from the settlement? Yes, Kellen answered. The scout's voice lowered. They say she ran. They say she owes them. And they say an Apache stole her. Leora closed her eyes. There it was. The lie she knew they would use. They would never admit she left because they mistreated her. Instead, they would claim she had broken some agreement, that she had been taken, that Kellen had done something unforgivable. Anything to make themselves innocent. Kellen rested a hand on her shoulder. Their words do not make their claim true. The scout frowned. Still, the men will hunt. They carry rifles now, and they want to make an example. Kellen's expression darkened. They will try. But we will not be their prey. He turned to Leora again, speaking gently. We go to the high cliffs. From there, we can cross into the deeper lands. They cannot follow without risk. Leora nodded, even though fear still twisted inside her. She didn't fully understand where he planned to lead her, but she trusted him more than anyone she had known. He had stood in front of her when others only walked away. The scout stepped closer. There is more, he said. The river trail is not safe. Someone else is out there. I saw fresh tracks. Not from the settlement riders. Kellen's eyes sharpened. Who then? I think it is the drifter they call Iron Creed, the scout answered. He has been wandering these lands. People say he hunts for coin. Others say he follows the scent of trouble. Leora felt a chill. She'd heard that name whispered once in the settlement, spoken by men who bragged too loud after too many drinks. Iron Creed had no allegiance, no loyalty, only a personal code shaped by survival. The kind of man who chose his side based on who paid or who crossed him. Kellen gave a slow nod. If he is near, he will choose his moment. What does he want? Leora asked. The scout hesitated. Hard to know. But trouble rarely walks alone on this land. Kellen placed his hand on her back in a protective gesture. We move now. Before the hunters multiply, they walked away from the river, climbing a narrow path carved into the rocky hillside. Leora followed as closely as she could, but her legs trembled with every step. She had been running for days. Fear alone had kept her upright, but now exhaustion pulled at her bones. Kellen noticed. We will stop in a moment, he said. Just until you catch your breath. I can keep going, she insisted, even though she wasn't sure she could. You do not need to prove strength right now, Kellen replied softly. You already have. His words warmed something inside her, but the unease never left. Far behind them, she could hear faint echo sounds carried on the wind that might have been riders or might have been nothing. But the uncertainty made every rustle feel like danger approaching. When they reached a flat stretch between two cliffs, Kellen motioned for them to rest. The scout kept watch near the edge, his eyes scanning the horizon. Leora sank onto a fallen log, breathing hard. Kellen crouched in front of her. You are carrying more fear than one person should, he said. It will break you if you hold it alone. She looked away. I don't have a choice. You do now. She swallowed tightly. Why are you helping me? You could have walked away. Kellen's expression softened, but there was a storm beneath it. Because someone once helped me when I was lost. Because I know what it feels like to be hunted. Because no one deserves to be dragged into a life they did not choose. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of something deeper in him, a wound, buried under years of silence. She wanted to ask, but he stood before she could speak. Eat, he said, handing her a small pouch with dried berries and bread. We will need strength for what comes. She took it, grateful. As she ate, she watched Kellen speak quietly with the scout. They were tense, alert, planning. She caught fragments of their words. They will reach the river by nightfall. The tracks are too close. Cannot risk the narrow pass. It's a settlement. We'll twist the story. We must find the hidden trail. Whispered peace reminded her that danger wasn't fading. It was closing in. When they resumed walking, the land grew harsher. Rocks jutted like broken teeth from the ground, and thorned bushes brushed her skirt. Leora stumbled more than once, but Kellen always reached back without hesitation, steadying her with a strong hand as the sky dimmed into early dusk. A sudden rustling on their right made the scout raise his spear. Kellen stopped, his eyes narrowing. Leora held her breath. A man stepped out from behind a tree, tall, lean, covered in dust, and wearing a long coat that touched his boots. His dark hair was tied low, and his eyes carried a sharpness that felt colder than steel. A rifle rested casually in his hand, but he didn't lift it. Iron Creed. He looked at Kellen first, then at Leora. A small smirk touched his lips. Looks like the stories traveling through town were true. Kellen didn't reach for his weapon, but his entire body shifted into guarded stillness. You are following us, he said. Creed shrugged. Following trouble, more like it tends to leave tracks. Leora felt Kellen move slightly in front of her. What do you want? He asked. Creed tilted his head, studying her with unsettling interest. I heard the settlement is paying good coin for bringing her back, but I don't like working for men who lie, and they lie plenty. Laura's stomach twisted. You're not with them? I'm with whoever keeps the land balanced, Creed said. Right now, they're tipping it out of shape. Blint's jaw tightened. So why are you here? To see which way the balance falls, Creed answered. And to decide whether I let the riders reach you first. Leora's pulse hammered. Why would you let them? Creed gave her a slow, unreadable look. Because choices have consequences. You left them angry. Angry men do foolish things. Kellen stepped closer to Creed, voice low. She chose freedom. That has consequences too, Creed chuckled quietly. Freedom always does. The wind picked up, blowing dust between them. Creed squinted toward the western ridge. They're coming fast. More than before? If you want to stay ahead, you'll need someone who knows the crooked ways through these cliffs. Kellen's brows lowered. And you would guide us? Maybe, Creed replied. If I decide you're worth the trouble. Leora felt her breath shake. What do you want from us? Creed's eyes met hers with a strange mix of curiosity and calculation. Your truth. Before I choose my side, Kellen stepped between them. This is not your fight, Creed shrugged. Maybe it is now. You've stirred the whole frontier with this, whether you meant to or not. Kellen tightened his grip on his staff. You will not touch her. Creed lifted his hands in a calm gesture. Easy. I'm not the enemy tonight. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. But the ones riding toward you are. Leora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The tension between them held like a rope pulled tight. Creed wasn't friend or foe, not yet. But his presence changed the path ahead, twisting it into something more dangerous, more uncertain. And as the sky darkened, a distant thunder of hooves began rolling across the land. The riders were coming. The world was shifting, and the next choice could break everything. The rumble of hooves grew heavier, rolling across the ground like distant thunder. The sound crawled under Leora's skin and sent a tremor up her spine. It was the same sound she had heard too many times in the past. Sound that meant trouble, control, pain, and every bit of fear her old life had forced into her bones. Now it echoed through the cliffs, as if the whole land knew that the final chase had begun. Kellen stood with grounded strength, in the horizon without blinking. His hand hovered near the staff at his side, fingers steady, despite the danger closing in around them. Iron Creed shifted his rifle across his shoulder and let out a slow breath. "They're closer than I thought," he muttered. "Faster, too." The scout, still keeping watch near the cliff's edge, turned sharply. "They have more riders than before. At least a dozen." Leora felt the air thin around her. "A dozen? Why?" Creed answered before Kellen could. "Because the settlement leader wants to show power, to make an example, to prove no one walks away from them." Kellen's jaw tightened. "They are cowards who hide behind numbers." Creed tilted his head. "Coward or not, they will reach us soon, and they won't come talking." Kellen walked closer to Leora, lowering his voice so she heard only him. "The trail ahead becomes narrow, dangerous, but it is our only path now. Once we reach the high cliffs, they cannot ride through without risking death." She swallowed hard. "And if they try, then the land itself will take them," Kellen said. "The ridge is sharp. One wrong step, and the cliff will decide their fate." It wasn't comforting, but she understood. She also understood something else. Kellen wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for her. That truth showed in the way he stood between her and the world. How he watched the shadows as if they might attack without warning. Creed stepped forward. "If you want a chance, you'll need me. I know the hidden break in the rocks. Without it, you'll be trapped." He pointed his rifle toward the north ridge. "We go that way." Kellen's eyes narrowed. "You expect us to trust you." Creed shrugged lightly. "Not trust. Just survive. There's a difference." Leora stepped closer to Kellen. "We have no time to argue. If he can help us escape, we need to go." Kellen looked at her, his expression softening with something deep and steady. He gave a short nod, then turned to Creed. "Lead the way. But know this. If you betray us, the land will not be the only thing you face." Creed smirked. "Fair enough." They moved quickly, climbing between two sharp rock walls that rose like towering blades on either side. The path was narrow, barely wide enough for two people, with loose gravel sliding under their steps. Leora felt Kellen's steady hand near her back, guiding her without pushing. The scout moved ahead, checking for danger, while Creed walked behind them at a calculated distance. With every step, the sound of hooves grew louder. The riders were spreading out behind them, closing in like a tightening net. Leora kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting to see them burst into view at any moment. Her heart pounded hard enough to ache. Creed's voice carried quietly. "They're too close. If they spot this path, they'll try to follow, even if it kills them." Kellen didn't look back. "They do not understand these cliffs. They think power is enough." The trail suddenly dipped into a steep descent covered in loose shale. Leora's foot slipped, and she gasped as she lost her balance. Kellen caught her arm instantly, pulling her against his side with a firm grip. "Careful," he said, his voice warm but urgent. "The ridge does not forgive mistakes." Her breath trembled. "I'm trying. I know," he replied. "But I am here. You will not fall." She nodded, clinging to that promise like the only solid ground left. As they reached the bottom of the dip, a sharp crack echoed from the cliffs behind them. Leora flinched. Creed swore under his breath. Rifle shot, he said. They found the trail. The scout looked back with wide eyes. They're trying to scare us down faster. Kellen shook his head. No, they want to force panic. Panic makes the ground more deadly. Creed adjusted his rifle. Well, their panic trick is working on my nerves. We need to move. They pushed forward again, the trail curving sharply around a massive stone outcrop. The light dimmed as the sun dropped lower, casting long shadows that tangled across the rocks like dark fingers. Leora could barely see in some places. But Kellen moved with certainty, his steps sure, his instincts sharp. Suddenly the scout raised a hand. Stop. Everyone froze. Leora listened, holding her breath, and she heard it. Not hooves. Not rifles. Something else. Movement above them. Heavy, slow, controlled. Creed muttered. We're not alone on this ridge. Kellen looked up toward the jagged rocks. Whoever it is, they watch. They do not follow the riders. Another hunter, Leora whispered. Creed squinted toward the rising stone. Or someone waiting to see who wins. The idea made Leora's stomach churn. The frontier had its own spectators sometimes. People who lived by taking advantage of chaos. Bandits, revenge hunters. Men who thrived on fear. Kellen placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Stay close. Do not look at the shadows. Look only where your feet step. They began moving again, faster now, with the unknown presence above, adding a new layer of danger. The cliffs narrowed until only one person could pass at a time. Kellen guided Leora through first, letting her move while he blocked the path behind her. Creed followed them last, rifle raised just in case. They reached a wider space, a natural ledge overlooking the entire valley below. The view might have been beautiful if not for the line of riders emerging from the distant trail. Dust rose behind them, like a signal fire. They were coming fast. The scout breathed out sharply. There are more than 12 now. Leora felt the blood drain from her face. How many? Nearly 20, Creed cursed. The settlement is desperate. They want control back so bad they're risking half the valley. Kellen walked to the edge, his expression heavy but determined. They do not understand the land they chase us through. They think numbers win every fight. Leora stepped beside him, her voice shaking. Kellen, what if they reach us? What if the cliffs don't stop them? Kellen looked down at her with a steadiness that calmed and frightened her at the same time. Then I will. Before she could respond, another sound cut through the air, sharper than hooves, sharper than voices. A whistle, then a crack. A small rock near her foot exploded into dust. Rifle fire. They were close enough to shoot. Kellen pulled her behind a jutting boulder. Keep your head low. Creed dropped to one knee, raising his own rifle. They're testing distance. They don't want to hit you yet. They want to scare you. It is working, Leora whispered, trembling. Kellen's hand closed around hers. Do not fear them. Fear gives them power. Creed peered through the crack between the rocks. If we don't move, they'll reach the narrow pass within minutes. Kellen nodded. We go to the hidden trail. The scout's face paled slightly. The hidden trail is dangerous even in daylight, Kellen answered. So is being caught. They moved again, this time with the urgency of people walking between closing jaws. Leora felt her breath quicken as she followed Kellen through another tight stretch of cliff. The light dimmed even more, until only thin stripes of sun cut through the cracks above. The path grew steeper, the air colder, the walls closer. At one point, Leora's boots slipped again, and she felt the dizzying drop beside her. Kellen grabbed her waist quickly, holding her upright. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she saw something in him she hadn't seen before. Something fierce and afraid, not of the cliffs, not of the riders, but of losing her. He whispered, Stay with me. I am trying, she breathed. You are doing more than trying. They pushed on. Rifle shots echoed again, closer this time. Creed fired back once, forcing the riders to slow. They're not stopping, he growled. They're willing to die chasing her, Kellen replied. Then they chase death, not her. The scout suddenly stopped ahead, his voice shaking. "There is a problem." Kellen moved forward. "What is it?" The scout pointed to a massive break in the trail. A section of the path had collapsed recently, leaving a gap wide enough to kill anyone who tried to cross without caution. Creed exhaled sharply. The storm last week must have cracked it. Leora stared at the gap, her heart plunging. "We cannot cross that." Kellen studied the broken stone, his expression unreadable. "There is a way, but it will take courage and trust." Behind them, the riders' voices grew louder, echoing through the stone walls. They had minutes left. Creed lifted his rifle. "I'll hold them off, but you need to move fast." Kellen looked at Leora, his eyes deep and steady. "Leora, listen to me. We must cross now. One step at a time. Look only at me, not at the fall." She swallowed hard, fear tearing at her chest. "Kellen, I don't know if I can." "You can," he said. "Because I will be with you through every breath you take." The cliff wind howled around them as he extended his hand. Behind them, the riders appeared at the mouth of the ridge. Shadows growing larger, guns raised, and Leora realized their next step would decide everything. Kellen extended his hand toward Leora as the wind whipped around them, carrying dust and the echo of the riders closing in. The broken trail stretched before her, a jagged gap that promised a deadly fall if she misstepped. Her breath trembled in her chest, but she saw the steadiness in Kellen's eyes. It wasn't just courage he offered. It was certainty. A promise that he would not let her fall, not now and not ever. She placed her hand in his, gripping tighter than she expected. Kellen guided her toward the edge, stepping to the narrow foothold carved by centuries of storms. The gap looked wider now that she stood above it, but Kellen never looked down. He focused only on her. "One step," he said softly. "Just one." With her heart hammering, Leora stepped forward. The stone shifted slightly under her boot, but Kellen pulled her closer across the gap, balancing her weight with his own. Her feet landed safely on the other side. She exhaled shakily, hardly believing she had done it. Kellen stepped after her in one smooth, powerful motion. Behind them, rifle shots rang again, sharper and more determined. Creed shouted from the other side of the gap, "Go! Don't wait for me." His voice carried the rough edge of someone who knew danger like an old friend. Kellen turned to the scout. "Cross. Now." The scout nodded and leapt across with practiced ease. Creed waited until the riders reached the edge before making his move. One of the riders fired at him, the bullet sparking against the rock beside his foot. Creed grinned as if amused and vaulted the gap, just in time. A rider tried to follow, but the moment his horse stepped onto the broken trail, the ledge crumbled beneath its weight. The man shouted in panic, scrambling back as the stones fell into the gorge below. The others pulled their horses away quickly, realizing they had reached the end of the trail. The settlement riders shouted threats across the canyon, their voices bouncing off the cliffs. Kellen stepped forward, shielding Leora with his body, as he answered in a calm, unwavering tone. "This land does not belong to you," he said, "and neither does she. Turn back." The riders hesitated. Some cursed. Others demanded Leora return. But none dared to cross the shattered gap. The ground had made the choice for them. Creed wiped dust from his coat and muttered, "Well, that settles the chase."
Oh.
Kellen placed a gentle hand on Leora's back. "We move, they cannot follow, but they will still spread lies. We must reach the high cliffs before nightfall." They continued until the path opened to a wide clearing framed by ancient stone pillars. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in warm gold and soft orange. It was the first moment in days that Leora felt air fill her lungs without fear pulling at her ribs. In the quiet, Scout found a soft patch of grass near the cliffs and motioned for them to rest. Leora sat, feeling her legs finally tremble with exhaustion. Kellen knelt beside her, eyes scanning her face with concern. "You did well," he said. She shook her head. "I was terrified." "Courage is not the absence of fear," Kellen replied. "It is walking forward despite it." Leora lowered her gaze. "I couldn't have done it without you." Kellen's voice softened even more. "And I could not have stood for you if you had not chosen your own freedom." Creed dropped beside a rock, leaning his rifle against it. Now that we're out of danger, maybe someone can explain why the settlement wanted her so badly. I've heard a dozen twisted stories. Leora hesitated, then spoke quietly. They wanted control. They always did. They said I owed them because I refused a promise they made without asking me. I was supposed to live by their rules and serve their needs. When I resisted, they claimed I was breaking agreements. It was easier for them to blame me than admit they were wrong. Creed nodded slowly. Figured it was something like that. Settlements like theirs cling to power like it's the last coin in their pocket. Kellen met Creed's eyes. You helped us. Why? Creed shrugged. Balance. The land doesn't like injustice. And neither do I. He stood and dusted off his hands. My part in this is done. You two have a long path ahead. Don't waste it. With that, he walked toward the distant ridge, disappearing like a shadow swallowed by the horizon. The scout bowed to Kellen, promising to return to his people with news that the danger had passed. Soon, only Kellen and Leora remained, as the sky shifted to twilight. Leora sat beside Kellen, watching the fading glow settle over the cliffs. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was warm, peaceful, grounding. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't trapped between fear and obedience. She was free. Kellen brushed a strand of hair from her shoulder. You have a choice now, he said. You may return to another settlement far from here. Start a new life. Or you may stay with my people. They will accept you. But the choice must be yours. No one controls your steps anymore. Leora turned to him, her voice soft but steady. I don't want to leave your side. Kellen inhaled deeply, as if her words reached somewhere inside him that had been quiet for years. If you stay, your life changes. My world is different from the one you came from. The land, the traditions, the challenges, but you would never walk any of it alone. Leora looked out over the cliffs, where the last light glittered across the distant river. My old life never felt like it belonged to me. Even as a child, I felt trapped. But with you, I don't feel trapped. I feel safe. Seen. Kellen gently took her hand. Stay by my side every day, and you will never suffer again. The words were the same ones he had spoken the moment he'd stood between her and danger, but now they carried more. Strength, hope, a future. She squeezed his hand. Then I choose you. I choose this path. Kellen leaned forward, pressing his forehead softly to hers in a gesture of deep honor and affection. The world around them quieted, as if the land itself welcomed their choice. They spent the night beneath the cliffs, the sky clear and full of stars. Kellen built a small fire and told her stories of his people, how they survived on strength and unity, how they protected those who needed refuge, how the land guided them. Leora shared pieces of her past, the pain she carried, the moments she believed she would never rise above. Kellen listened without judgment, holding her stories with the same care he showed when guiding her across the broken trail. At dawn, soft breeze whispered across the plains. Kellen led her toward his homeland, where tall pines guarded the valley and streams flowed clear and cold. As they walked, she felt lighter with every step, as if each stride shed another layer of her old life. When they reached the boundary of Kellen's village, the people welcomed her with quiet respect and gentle curiosity. Elders nodded in approval when they saw her hand in Kellen's. Children ran past them laughing, free and unburdened. A warmth she had never known bloomed inside her, spreading through every part of her heart days past. Then weeks. Leora learned how to ride bareback with Kellen guiding her. She learned to weave baskets from the women who whispered encouragement. She learned which roots healed wounds and which leaves soothed fear. She learned the rhythm of a life that didn't ask her to bow her head or hide her voice. Most of all, she learned how it felt to be cherished without conditions. Kellen stayed by her side every day, as gentle as the river and as strong as the mountains. Leora found herself smiling more, dreaming more, and believing she deserved happiness. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridges, Kellen stood beside her overlooking the valley. Your courage changed your path, he said, but your heart shaped your new life. She leaned against him, feeling his steady breath. "And you showed me that freedom is more than escape. It's choosing who stands with you." Kellen wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "You stand with me, and I will honor that for the rest of my days." The sun set gently, the land glowing with soft gold as if blessing their future, and under that warm, endless sky, Leora finally felt the truth settle within her. She was safe. She was free. She was loved. Her old suffering had ended, and a new life, strong, peaceful, and full of hope, had begun.